Okay, yeah, we're going to move to 18. So that's Deputy Superintendent Patty Norman. You've got a group coming up. There's a School Safety Advisory Committee report. I believe there's a couple of our board members that are on that committee that's going to be part of this presentation, and it's an information item. Vice Chair Cummins, can you take the helm here just a little bit? I'm got to take a call. We're going to act on a call that's been bugging me.
I know, I'm going to have to read on this one. Okay. Oh, wait, she's got all that.
I only have, yeah. Where is it not showing? All right.
Oh, good, I can see.
In our 10 minutes, we're going to go ahead and start and, oops, wrong one. That's the other presentation. Okay. One of the reasons why we're really trying to get this today is because we are going to be presenting to the Educational Interim Committee. Yes, we are. Okay. And so we wanted to be able to let the board know first and have questions answered before moving on. This does align with our vision and mission, and specifically the goal of safe and healthy schools. So we're going to look at this presentation through that lens. Again, this was the asked for by the, let me get right to where we're at, by the Educational Interim Committee and then by our own board. To remind you, there was 4 different entities. It was USSA, USBE, the Governor's Office, and the Utah Safe Schools Commission, led by Representative Ward, that all came to the Ed Interim Committee. Then we gathered together and created a larger group, which is a School Safety Advisory Committee, made up of the following members that you can see up there right now. With these entities, the Utah State School Advisory Committee was established as a result of this, and each of them came together and represented priorities. There have been 4 meetings to date, and then we are going to be there's going to be one final meeting on October 7th in October, and then we will be presenting to the Ed Interim Committee on October 17th. So here's the key objectives of the committee. As a reminder, it's to collectively determine safe school priorities, to strategize recommendations for improvement, to brainstorm possible legislative asks, compile the foundational pieces for a statewide framework for student and school safety, and also committee members that are on this advisory committee that you saw the list for previously have been asked to gather feedback from their constituents to inform the work and assist in the prioritization of effort. Ongoing, the ask is that this committee continue to meet, look at data, revise it, and continue to look at the school safety concerns so that we are continually looking at the trends and data moving forward. That being said, I wanted to show what the framework looks like and not pass it out yet. So, yes, because it just causes chaos and havoc. So, don't pass it out. I just learned from before. And we're not, you guys, just imagine, not mention it, just going to kind of look through it. So, a framework is actually very deep, and there's a lot of depth to it. It establishes the purpose, the why, the how, all of the work that was done, and then it goes into what it is that we're going to do and how we're going to address it, and possible legislative and fiscal asks that go along with it. So, when you look at this, it's not just a piece of paper, and each one of these then actually will have live links, so it's even deeper than this. So this is just a piece of paper to represent, and this is the rough draft that we have right now, but then it will be even have more depth and complexity as we move forward. The committee found the 8 foundational conditions for a school safety plan, and in the interest of time, you have this in your board docs. I'll let you read through that on your own, because what's most important is for the board to look at what those priorities and recommendations are that we will be moving on and talking to the interim committee about. This is the 4 areas that we call them similitudes, or the thing that the plans had in common, and now we are going to be having board member Hanson and Hanson and Warner that will be talking about these individually.
So you're on the, let me turn this back on. So as board members have questions and that, do you want to take them at the end of your presentation and the inventorium? Is that what you want to do?
Yes.
Okay.
So we divided into groups and we discussed all of these, and so we're going to go through these one at a time for you. Mental health supports and preventative programs. Priority number 1, increase on-site resources for mental health services. $30 million ongoing funds to hire professionals. That's what we're suggesting for a legislative ask. Priority number 2, mental health training for teachers and all school staff. Priority 3, threat assessment and student support teams implemented at the school and or local level. And we know that there will probably be legislation on this one. We've already heard from the legislator who would like to sponsor that legislation. Priority number 4, collect and analyze student risk and protective factors in school climate. And the potential ask for that is a cost for a program evaluator and some school climate surveys starting at about $100,000.
So I'm going to talk about public safety and law enforcement. There were a couple of us on this committee, and we have two suggestions and priorities. The first one is a public safety liaison position here at the State Board of Education. We're seeing more rules and we're seeing more legislation that requires that a law enforcement partner be here, and it would really help for us to have a sworn law enforcement officer who's gone through post-training, SRO training, that really knows the laws of how to be an SRO and law enforcement based. So we will be asking for that as part of our committee. The second one I want to talk about is the Tier 1 retirement issues and making that change. So for those of you that are not government employees on URS, I'll just take a second and explain that. Right now, the state has URS, the Utah Retirement Systems. Tier 1 employees are employees that started, I think, before, they've had to be at least 10 years ago. But right now, there was a change in the legislature about 2008, 2009 with Tier 1 employees. So a Tier 1 employee cannot retire and then come back in a different capacity. So let's use Jenny as an example. Jenny is a very competent teacher. Let's say she decides she wants to retire. She can't retire and come back in as a reading specialist. She can't come back in as an aide. And the idea of taking our retired teachers and not letting them come back doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. There's a cap. They could come back and make $15,000, or Jenny can wait a year and then come back. So right now in our critical teacher shortage, we have some positions that could be filled by people that have been in the classroom setting for many years. We believe that this will lead to an increase in public safety with our students because they're used to being around these students if this was fixed. The other thing is with law enforcement. Law enforcement also, law enforcement can't retire and push a broom, drive a bus. They have to wait a year, or they can't make more than $15,000. So for these two critical shortage areas, we would like to have a priority where that area for Tier 1 employees would be fixed. I think it also goes hand in hand with Representative Ward's threat assessment bill that he's opened. It's based on the Virginia Threat Assessment team, which is an SRO, a law enforcement officer, somebody from the school system. And if we have people that have been in the schools teaching for a long period of time and they want to come back into some other different profession or position in the schools, we could include them on that threat assessment team. So those are the two areas that we've come up with.
Okay, technology and facilities, priority number 1, increase on-site school protection resources through construction updates and design. These are the kinds of things that we've heard a lot of people talk about, double doors, buzzing in, those kinds of things. Potential legislative ask, $65 million one time. Priority number 2, create or increase the ability of an existing tool for uniform documentation and identification of at-risk schools. Priority number 3, building and construction safety specialist at USBE. And didn't we just get one of those, Sid? Was she the person that was introduced today?
Yes, but I don't know how much she attaches this Scott with that.
Sorry, I caught you guys off guard a little bit. I was just, when I heard her introduced, I thought that might be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. not the same, they said. Priority number 4, building construction receives input from fire department, public safety. There was a lot of discussion about who should decide what buildings look like. And there's concern about all the glass. Some people think that's safer, some people think it's not as safe. But we talked about that it would be great to have collaboration between the fire marshal and law enforcement when buildings are being built, to just check with them to make sure that their input is received when buildings are built.
And then the last one is the crisis response and emergency planning, making sure that we have common language and an all hazards approach and uniformity in drills. So there may need to be some legislation on this. And the reason is because most of the time, if there's some sort of crisis incident at a school, law enforcement will be there. Law enforcement already has a standardization of terms and approaches. For example, we talked about different things that were taking place on the Wasatch Front. You may have on the Wasatch Front 10 law enforcement agencies responding. They're pretty much all able to work together, but we need to make sure that our schools are using the same languages that law enforcement is using, and that we're using the same drills and as we move forward, so that everybody kind of is on the same page and they know what they're talking about.
So at this time, one of the overarching things that you'll notice is there was an original ask by the JLC, and that was for a 3065. That's what you'll be hearing, around 3065. With this committee, the advisory board, that is a basic minimum ask, and as you can see, that's going to be more than that once we've delved into it and really identified some of the needs that will be there for us to really have safe and healthy schools. So with that in mind, these priorities that we will be bringing to the Ed Interim Committee, we would like to know if there's feedback, recommendations, or where we should move from here.
Okay. Board Member Reby.
So my concern and my constant feedback is that we are the State Board of Education, and we are now taking on safety, crisis management, healthcare. It's not that I don't want to take responsibility for these students, and it's not that I don't care for students, but I don't think that we should be in charge of all the safety in our schools. We should be giving that budget to our experts, our public safety people. With mental health, I would like to be the liaison and make a better conduit, but I don't think school teachers and people in schools should be the primary place where we're doing all these things. I think that we should try to start moving back to just being the educators. And I do believe that these services are very important, but like right now, the safety, I think we should just be giving all of that budget to public safety. They're the experts. They know everything about, and they should be doing that. We should be not encumbering that debt. We should not be encumbering that. That's not our wheelhouse. That we are educators. We should be deferring to our public safety experts, our trauma crisis people. And we don't have the budget for this. And so I'm just confused why this is falling to the State Board of Education. Just because there are buildings doesn't mean that we shouldn't be providing the police forces. We should not. And I'm not like attacking anybody, but I want this to be something that's given to somebody else that has better expertise than the teachers in the schools.
May I
Some
respond?
comments and then-
Yes. I think that the advisory committee would agree with what you're saying right now. And if I put this back up here, the committee is a collaborative body comprised of representatives from state and local agencies, including. And if you look down that list, it's the bodies that you just mentioned. So not necessarily are these legislative asks going to be coming back here to the State Board of Education. It's money that collectively, when Senator Milner said the 4 entities, USSA, USBE, Representative Ward, and the governor's office, all having recommendations coming together, what are those things that we agreed upon? And then those things might go out to the other entities. So it's not necessarily the ownership of that money or where it will impact, but it's saying collectively, if we all agree on these things, then this is what we're going to ask for. Then the next step is who does that go to? So it's agreeing on these items, what we can agree on and what we can't agree on. The things that we can agree on is all of those entities that you see represented up here, then they would move those forward as in interim.
Board Member Lisa Cummins.
I would just echo and agree with Kathleen Reby on this. Teachers cannot handle one more thing. They will break. I have talked to a high school principal. He said that currently he is the first responder for the Safe UT app.
Right.
They are exhausted. They cannot handle this. They are not supposed to handle this. They are not trained. They're not supposed to be trained. They're supposed to be educating our students. I actually had him say to me, right now I could care less about the achievement factors because I cannot go beyond the mental health factors right now. They are overworked, under-supported, and we are in big trouble. If we add one more thing to these teachers and the administrators, they will break.
Superintendent Dixon?
Yeah, I just want to respond to that. I think, as someone who sits on the committee, I think that that's exactly what the recommendations are doing. They're trying to provide funding so that local education agencies, district schools can make decisions about what they need in their schools. So that, for example, the $30 million that would be asked for ongoing, they can get the support personnel in their schools. They can get additional mental health workers. It's whatever they choose. It's around school safety, and then the one time is for physical buildings. So, for example, I was just down in Moab as part of my school tour and saw how Grand High School has used funding to provide a single entry where they have to go through the office, and many schools are moving to that. That's a good use of one-time funding. So it's thinking about ways to take this off of the teacher's plate and add personnel in there to support them. So when you say it, I'm not. This is not being critical. I just don't know what you mean by it. Is it the training for teachers and leaders, and that training would not be for them to handle and mitigate everything, but just awareness and understanding. So I think sometimes people are overwhelmed because they don't know what to do. So it's some recognition, and then putting recognition of signs, how to work with parents and agencies to support some of the issues, and then placing people in the schools to provide that support so educators don't feel so overwhelmed. So I think the committee discussed this to address the exact things you're talking about. So I think the committee's in agreement with what you're saying, but it's not adding to, it's providing support in the schools to take it off their plates.
Board Member Lear?
I just had a question for you folks. Was there any discussion in your various meetings about the balance between making schools safe and keeping a culture in the school that is welcoming, so that to keep schools safe, we could have bars and guards and metal detectors, and kids will have more truancy, more parents keeping their kids home. And because I worry as much about that balance of making a school a place that people want to be as I do about schools could be really safe, like jails, and then, more kids won't come.
So if you look at the school safety framework, the very first foundation is establishing a positive and supportive school culture and allowing schools the flexibility to determine how does that look for them. So.
Board Member Reby?
Thank you, Superintendent Dixon, for clarifying. So, when I look at that list, I see the Department of Human Services. I would like the Department of Human Services to spearhead mental health, and they do. And I'd like that to be a cooperation more. I see public safety. I'd like the public safety people to be in charge of the trauma and so I don't want us to be asking them, oh, what should we do? I want them to be telling us what to do. I want them to be the experts that are telling us. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you so much for all your work you've done.
And I want to say the same thank you. And the people that I've talked to that have been serving on this, and then as it goes out to other people, the intent is where the accountability and responsibility lies is they've got to step up their game. It's not USBE stepping up their game, it's them. And when it comes to our buildings and stuff, that's a kind of a unique thing because every district, their buildings are built, and improvements to their buildings are capital projects that come from those local taxpayers. And to just go to say, hey, we want all this money to do this, I'm a little bit concerned that's going to come from the public education or be seen as more money into public education, and that's not the case. And So hopefully that's getting pushed down. When you had a few spots up here about buildings and all of that, it's, the legislature can certainly do something on their side on buildings, but there's building code out there, and whether you're a law office, if you're a public building, or not a public building, if you have access to the public, you're a commercial building, the codes are the same, whether you're an elementary school or a health spa or a gym, for access and that. And the codes there isn't any codes out there that have school safety in mind. So it's bigger than just saying, let's throw some money and do some fixes until they change that. So hopefully in your committees, as you're talking about that side of it, codes need to change so architects and others that, especially on new buildings, have a different thought process or some different standard than the uniform building code that's already out there. So I see this moving in the right direction, that it's not coming on us, but I see some big holes when people think, well, let's just get some money to do some special entry and different things. Look, we're so unique with our public education, and all of our buildings are not standardized, that I see that as a little bit of a challenge. So thank you for your work, and I believe that one of those big solutions to a lot of the challenges that we're having is there's something out there where people say it's knowing and using your resources. We have these great resources that retire from a fire department or some law enforcement agency, and because it's state, there's got to be a way that public education can have access to those people instantly upon retirement. So I applaud your efforts there. So thank you for what you do, and it's a good report. We look forward to more. Hey, board members, how are we holding up? Barely?